Welcome to the HerbWorks podcast featuring Roger Drummer, the formulator at herbworks.com. An educator in the field of nutrition and Chinese herbalism, Roger has a unique ability to keep things simple by taking all the guesswork out of complicated health issues. HerbWorks is committed to helping you improve your health and enhance your life through herbs and common sense.
Roger Drummer here with another HerbWorks podcast. And the topic today is, it's a Roundup ready world. Obviously, we're going to be talking about pesticides and the latest news that's come out about Roundup, which is a pesticide, an herbicide actually, that's made by Monsanto, everyone's favorite company. So the reason Roundup's been in the news lately is because they just lost a huge lawsuit in California to the tune of $289 million to a man who worked maintenance yard work at a local school and got cancer and is in the process of dying. And basically they awarded this man $280 million because they proved that Roundup was probably carcinogenic and that Monsanto didn't do anything to warn the people that were using it. And so I'm not as shocked about the amount of money as I am the fact that Monsanto actually lost a lawsuit. Monsanto is one of the most powerful companies in the entire world. And for them to lose a lawsuit is just beyond belief for me. I'm sure there's going to be some other filings around this lawsuit. They're going to fight it tooth and nail. But the reality is they lost initially in a $289 million lawsuit. And there's 4,000 more people ready to sue them over their cancers that they claim is traceable back to the use of Roundup. Now let's talk about that a little bit. According to the company, Monsanto, they have over 800 studies done by them, mostly them, and other countries, other groups, scientific groups in different countries that allow products into their country that all claim that it does not cause cancer and that it's completely safe. Now, there is some question about whether glyphosate, which is the main chemical in Roundup, causes cancer, or it's the other chemicals they combine it with that causes cancer. But the reality is, it's in 700 different herbicides and pesticides that are commonly used in the United States. Thinking about that. Now, you wonder how so much of this shows up in the environment anyway. Well, think about this number, 250 million pounds. That's quite a big number. That's how many pounds of Roundup is used every year in the United States. Now you wonder, wow, is that all going on to, farm crops? Is that all being sprayed out in the fields? No, not actually. If you ever notice your neighbor probably walking around his yard spraying weeds or spraying around his house, he's more than likely using Roundup. Roundup is one of the most commonly sold herbicides that you can pick up at any hardware store. Everybody's using it. They walk around, they buy their little pumps, and they go around spraying every little thing they can find in their yard. It's amazing to me how people no longer want to see one single weed, and they're willing to spray a pesticide, which is possibly carcinogenic, on that particular weed, and then basically expose themselves to a harmful chemical. And this is probably the root of really what's happening with Roundup and all these other pesticides. There's just so much of it in the environment. And there's never been any real test. And I call it real test because most tests aren't done by independent companies. And the ones that do it actually argue with Monsanto's results. Now, I'm not a chemist or a scientist, so I can't honestly tell you that Roundup's a carcinogen or it's not a carcinogen. I just have this really strange opinion about pesticides in general, and that strange opinion is this. if you have a chemical that's designed to kill something else, whether that's insects or weeds, then I probably don't want to eat that chemical. Because if it's designed to kill something, it's probably not good for the cells in my body. And by not good, I would mean carcinogenic, because any chemical that your body cannot break down then can cause cellular damage, which then can cause cancer. That's just my feeling. I don't like to eat pesticides. I don't find that there's any nutritional benefit to it, and so I like to avoid it. The funny thing about pesticides, if there's anything funny about it at all, is that when I got back into the health industry back in the early 80s, that's when I really kind of got introduced to the whole health industry, and I got a job at a health food store and started the whole process. A few months before that, I became a vegetarian. It was kind of this progression thing. But I remember the reason I started eating organic foods, and this happened back in 1981, was I was helping someone put some produce into the produce department at the very large health food store that I worked at. It wasn't my department, but he needed some help. And there was celery that we were stocking, and I happened to eat some of it without washing it really well, and my entire mouth went completely numb. And it was from the chemical residue on that non-organic celery. And so that kind of spurred me on to just buy organic food, and I've been doing it ever since. But the funny thing is, I wouldn't forget that I said it's going to be funny, was that back then, your whole goal of eating organic food was to eliminate pesticides and herbicides from your diet. Well, today, you have to kind of change your whole way of looking at it to the fact that there's so much of it in the environment, and there's so much blowover between fields that you're now just happy if you only eat 2 or 3 pesticides a day. And you hope that those pesticides are in small amounts. Now, I'm an organic food guy. I eat almost exclusively organic foods. And I'll bet you that if I went down and had my urine tested for pesticides, you could find some. Think about that. You can't get away from it. There's so much of it in the environment. But there's other things you can actually do, and we'll cover a little bit of that in this podcast. So we're going to talk about herbicides, pesticides, how to get them out of your system, how your body might be set up to help you do that, why you want to eat organic foods. We're going to cover a lot of topics. It's all right around this whole idea of Roundup Ready, and whether it's we're just living in a Roundup Ready world.
This podcast is brought to you by HerbWorks, specializing in stress and brain essentials. Check out Roger's other articles and videos at herbworks.com. While you're there, take a look at our natural herbal-based product line for energy, stress, immunity, and sleep. Now back to Roger.
It's one of those pesticides that's so prevalent in our, country and all around the world now that it's kind of like you almost have to have something in your diet just to deal with Roundup. So besides the lawsuit, the other thing that was in the news was this study done by the Environmental Working Group. Now, in case you're not familiar with the Environmental Working Group, it's a group that's, wants to do great things for the environment, but they're privately, funded by donations, and they basically test foods. They do a lot of studies on the environment and on water, everything that has to do with safety and chemicals in the environment. They have one of the best guides on how to buy, pesticide-free food. They have great guides on skin products that you want to use. They're an amazing company to people like me who are in the health industry. But then the pesticide industry and the chemical companies absolutely hate the Environmental Working Group. They think they're too radical for pushing organic agendas. And so, anyway, that's the Environmental Working Group. And they did a study on glyphosate and Roundup. And just so you know, this study was published based on their recommendations for how much Roundup you should have in your diet. Now, their recommendations are much lower than the EPA because they feel the EPA, their levels are actually outdated. They were done back in 1993 when there wasn't that much Roundup in the environment at that time, and now it's everywhere. And also they feel that you should have lower levels allowed in food because a lot of the products that they tested were products that were used, not exclusively, but by a large segment of the population of children in this country. In other words, children consume a lot of the types of products that this is found in, and what they focused on when they did their test was oat products, because oat products are used in just about everything that's used for breakfast. I mean, what kid do you know that doesn't wake up and have cereal for breakfast or eat, granola bars or something on their way to school? So it's found so they kind of centered their studies on oat products. And what they found was that, let me finish my talk here on the limits. So the Environmental Working Group has a much lower standard than the EPA because they want to protect children. Now, just so you know, the state of California also has much lower standards than the EPA. Theirs is like 60 times less, and the environmental group is like 100 times less, somewhere in that level. So just so you know, the Environmental Working Group does have standards that are more strict than the Environmental Protection Agency. That doesn't surprise me because the Environmental Protection Agency is heavily influenced by the government and heavily influenced by the companies they're actually supposed to be policing. So anyway, in their studies, the EWG studies, the Environmental Working Group, they tested 45 products, by the way, and they found unsafe levels in most of them, and a lot of them are common products like Cheerios, Quaker Oats, Kind bars. That one hurt me. Kind bars. My kids love Kind bars. But Kind bars, Kind bars are like unbelievably, you would think that they'd be highly nutritious, but now I'm really put off by that. But anyway, Quaker Oats had the most glyphosate of any product. In fact, Quaker Oats issued a statement saying that they do not add glyphosate in the processing of the oats to make their product. Now, when I read that, I have to admit that I laughed out loud. They're basically saying, no, we don't spray our oats with pesticides when they come to the warehouse. Well, obviously you don't. But they really wanted to say that they weren't, the levels in their products were not due to something they were doing. Well, obviously, oats are just like wheat. Nowadays, they spray the fields with Roundup to kill the plants before harvest so that they become drier in a much quicker fashion so they can harvest them and get them off to the warehouse. And by making them drier, they get a little bit more money for their crop. And so you get that extra nice coating of pesticides right before it goes to the processing plant. It's a great idea if you're a company like Monsanto. Anyway, so it's in 45 different products. And these, by the way, are all products that are not organic. Now, by the way, they did test 16 different organic products containing oats, and they found traces of it. Although it was just traces, it was still considered safe by the Environmental Working Group, but they found traces of it in 5 of the 16 products, which pretty much gives you an idea that Roundup's in the environment. There's blowover between fields. It could be in the water that is being used to irrigate some fields. It's just so prevalent in the environment, you can't keep it out of everything. And this is why I said that, today, I just hope that I only eat a couple pesticides a day, because I don't think you can get away from it, even eating organic. One of the studies that was done on glyphosate showed that it caused shorter pregnancies, lower birth weights, and the kids that were born had a higher risk for diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. Now, that sounds pretty bad, especially when you consider that we have such a higher prevalence for diabetes, heart disease, and obesity anyway in this country. Right now, I think 30% of the population is obese. Almost, I would say 40 to 50%, somewhere in that general area, is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. You know, when you add in all the people that don't even know they're pre-diabetic, it's a huge number of people have blood sugar problems. And heart disease is the number one killer already anyway. So to be born with a almost like your body has a tendency now to get those three things. Those are the three main things driving all the cost of healthcare and expenses today in this country anyway. So why have something in your diet, if you can avoid it, that will help you in those general areas? That's my opinion on it. Rats that they fed glycophosphate to. And by the way, I feel sorry for rats because, you know, they live in an environment where they have to eat glycophosphate because they're in barns and they're around farms, and that's where, unless they're a city rat. But anyway, rats develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is a type of disease where your liver becomes coated with fat and it can no longer process things and loses its function. And it's very similar to cirrhosis of the liver that you get from being an alcoholic. Only the damage comes from a high fructose diet and a high sugar and processed food diet. So this excessive amounts of Roundup or pesticide tend to cause this same disease in rats. Now, you might think, well, I've never heard of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but the reality is that is considered by some people to be becoming an epidemic in this country also. And so anybody that's usually obese or has diabetes probably has either the beginning stages of it or full-blown non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They just don't know it because it's not a common test. But when you put on that much weight that you're considered obese, more than likely your metabolism is failing. And part of that is that your liver's messed up and unable to participate in your metabolism. And so it's not processing things. Now, this gets us kind of to our next subject. Within this subject is how do you protect yourself from pesticides? Well, the first thing that you do is you want to eat mostly organic because it's going to have fewer pesticides in it. You can go to the Environmental Working Group's own website and look up their Clean 15, which is a list of foods that you can buy that don't necessarily have to be organic because they've been tested so often they have very few pesticides in them, if any. And so they're considered clean foods. And then you can look at their Dirty Dozen, which is the foods that have the most pesticides on them historically, and avoid them completely unless you buy organic. And I always remember this, is that strawberries are the number one food almost every year, and they generally tend to have 15 different herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides sprayed on every batch that they test. Now, that's a lot of chemicals. I actually cringe when I'm in a store and I see somebody picking up a box of strawberries right next to a display of organic strawberries, and they make that decision based on saving $1 or something. And I just always think that they just don't know. They just, it's the only thing I can think of. They just don't know. Why would you buy that many chemicals and put it into your system? Now, the other way that you avoid getting damaged by pesticides is to eat a lot of green foods and protect your liver. Now, this is how this whole system works. Now, preferably these green foods that you're buying to protect your liver are organic because they'll have less chemical residue, hopefully very little chemical residue. But even if you can't buy organic, it's still going to help your system out if you buy good quality, fresh greens, organic or non-organic, just preferably organic. But here's how your body protects itself from pesticides anyway. You have to have a really well-functioned liver. In other words, your liver needs to be functioning at such a high level because your liver is that organ that creates this whole complex scenario by which it takes carcinogenic substances out of your system and tags them and sets them up for another part of liver function where it binds with it and takes it out of your body. So your liver processes carcinogens, binds with it, and gets rid of it. But your liver can't do that unless it is making certain chemicals itself. And it can't make those chemicals if you're not eating healthy food to supply it with the nutrients needed to make those certain processes work. And so this is why you want to eat greens every day. You want to have some sort of green food. This is why we always talk about eating broccoli and collards and chard and Brussels sprouts. They're all anti-cancer. Well, they're anti-cancer for a reason. They help your liver to process carcinogenic substances. So if you're not doing that, then your liver can't really do that process. You've ever read those articles? This is kind of funny. I was talking to a friend of mine about this. You ever read those articles where somebody's lived to be 102 years old and they go, what's their secret? And they go, a cigar every night and a shot of whiskey, right? Well, you think, people don't have to eat healthy. There's nothing, why should I do it if they could have a cigar every day? Well, what you should be realizing is that person, whatever else is going on in their life, had a really well-functioning liver because it processed carcinogens really well. And a lot of those people that do that, you find out they actually ate a pretty decent diet. In fact, if they're one of those people that live in the blue zones, they eat a pretty healthy diet of mostly natural foods. They're not picking up snack foods and living on potato chips and corn chips and all these other things. And so they're getting a lot of natural food in their system that helps their diet process things and bind with carcinogenic substances. This is the key to all of it, how your liver binds with carcinogens and moves it out of your system. Now, being an herbalist, this interests me, and there's a lot of great herbs that help your liver process things. One of the most famous ones is milk thistle. You've all heard of milk thistle, I would think, but milk thistle is famous for its ability to detox your liver and to keep it safe from certain carcinogenic substances. I had a friend who used to do wine tastings, and they swore by milk thistle. They just took it every single day, and they had their liver tested every month, and it always tested out positive for them. And so it was part of their job, and that's what they did. And so they took milk thistle every day. Now, the Chinese equivalent of that is called schizandra. And schizandra is a berry, and that's a very potent tonic herb for detoxing your liver. Now, the difference between an herb like schizandra and an herb like milk thistle is that schizandra is a tonic. It's considered to be a food. In fact, it's a berry. Milk thistle is more of what you would call a medicinal substance. It has chemicals in it that bind with carcinogens and move it out of your system quite well. But there's nothing there that kind of builds your system up, so it's not considered to be a food-grade herb. It's kind of harsh on your liver and should be combined with other things. Whereas schizandra is considered to be a food and something that you can take every day quite risk-free. And it has some building qualities to it. It helps detox your lungs. It's very good for detoxing your liver, but it's also known as a chi tonic. It actually increases the production of ATP in your cells. It builds physical energy. So it's used in all kinds of beauty products. It balances the water metabolism in your cells. It's an amazing herb, but it is considered the Chinese equivalent to milk thistle, only better. So schizandra is the main herb in my formula Tian Chi. Now, I didn't put it in there because it detoxes your liver, but I put it in there because it brightens your mind. It has this effect of clearing your mind, and it calms your nervous system, and it helps you to produce energy. And, Tianqi is an energy stress relieving formula. In fact, Schizandra is the biggest herb in my entire formula, meaning that there's more Schizandra in it than any other herb in the formula. And it's really amazing in its ability to not only make things, like your mind just clearer, but it does detoxify your liver, gives you extra physical energy. So it's a very important herb, and one of my favorite herbs in Chinese tonic herbalism. So it has a very sour berry-like taste, and it tends to go well with some of the other herbs in the formula, and it makes the mix more palatable when I mix it in with flavors and raspberries. And so, Schizandra is just a great herb, and one of the first herbs I actually learned about when I was studying Chinese tonic herbalism. And back then, it was just used mostly in beauty formulas. And so, but it's been tested, actually done little clinical trials in China as a treatment by itself for hepatitis, quite successfully too. So it has a broad range of activity in the body, and it's very potent. It's been used just as a medicine in cases of things like hepatitis and other liver ailments. And so Schizandra is an amazing herb, and this really points out how you take care of your liver and how you take care and protect yourself from pesticides. Because one of the things they mentioned in this article is that, herbicides and pesticides are just one thing. How can you actually take that out and in context say that everything that's happening to you is because of that one chemical, when the reality is you probably have 20 to 30 of these chemicals in your system? You remember when the Environmental Working Group did the studies on newborns? They took a blood sample when they were born and took a blood sample from the umbilical cord and found on average, over 200 different chemical substances in the blood of a newborn baby. Think about that. Usually 78 to 80 of those chemicals were endocrine disruptors, meaning they disrupted the function of your glandular system. There was all kinds of pesticides and herbicides in their system. And these are kids that haven't even spent a full 24 hours on the planet yet. So the reality is that you have to protect yourself, and you have to do something every single day to protect yourself. And it's like they said, we want to be aware of pesticides, things like Roundup, and different herbicides that are in the environment. But we also know that eating fried food causes carcinogenic substances. Look at the fires that are going on in California right now. I can't go out my house here in Nevada without smelling the burning smoke in the air, and it's affecting my lungs and making my allergies here in Nevada worse. Then you have lack of sleep. You have things that you take over the counter. Things like Tylenol. Tylenol is it's a brand name for a chemical called acetaminophen, but that's been shown to literally dissolve your liver if you take it within 36 hours of having alcohol. And so we have all these different things in our system, and we have to be able to think about the fact that our diets need to be healthy enough to help our liver process all these things. By the way, just so you know, Schizandra was actually used in a study and shown to offset the effect of having to take acetaminophen. So if you're someone that takes acetaminophen for headaches once in a while or hangovers, it probably would be a very good idea for you to use some Schizandra every day to protect your liver from it. Or even better yet, if you're someone that drinks too much on a regular basis, hopefully you're not, you should drink some Tianqi, because it's an amazing morning after drink. I'll just put it that way. For bringing back some mental clarity and cleaning your system out. So anyway, this is how we protect ourselves. We cannot live today in an environment where we're never going to be exposed to Roundup or other pesticides, herbicides. You can't spend your whole life testing every single food that you actually eat and worrying about every single thing you put in your body and whether or not you've got your daily dose of pesticides that day. But what you can do is really hone in on the basics of how you protect yourself from everything in the environment. And that is still the best route is to buy organic, eat organic as often as possible, limit the foods that you eat that are heavily fried, and take herbs and have herbs in your system and nutrition that helps your liver with the processing of chemicals and helps keep your liver in working order so that when you are exposed to something, it's actually able to bind with those carcinogens and move it out of your system. Now, probably the top 2 or 3 things that you might want to do to protect your liver: eat organic, eat a lot of greens, take herbs like milk thistle and schizandra, and that pretty much is a good starting point for just about anybody. Thank you. This has been Roger Drummer with HerbWorks, and if you like this podcast, you can find it at herbworks.com.